We are officially in the penultimate episode of the season, and I genuinely cannot believe how fast this got here. It feels like just yesterday we were watching that premiere, and now we are 2 episodes away from the end of Season 4. And the title of this one says it all: The Calm Before. But let's be honest with each other right now. Does anything about this trailer actually feel calm to you? Because to me, it feels like the opposite. It feels like the loudest, most chaotic setup we have gotten all season, and I think the title is doing exactly what titles in this show always do, which is lie to us right to our faces. So today, I want to break down exactly why I think this plan, the plan that Boyd is about to set in motion, is doomed before it even starts. And I want to walk you through the trailer piece by piece so you can see the same cracks I'm seeing. So hit that subscribe right now, set it on fire. Let's start with the obvious. Boyd is setting a daring and dangerous plan into motion. That is literally the official line being used to describe this episode. Daring and dangerous. Not daring and smart. Not daring and necessary. Daring and dangerous. When a show tells you flat out that the plan is dangerous, that is not flavor text. That is a warning label. And I think people are going to ignore that warning label the same way the residents inside the town are about to ignore every red flag being waved in front of their faces. So here is where we are coming into this. Jade has been pushing this theory about the bones in the tunnel for what feels like the entire back half of this season. And Boyd has said no, multiple times. He has called it a suicide mission. He has refused to commit his people to it. And every single time Jade comes back with a new version of the plan, Boyd finds a new reason it falls short in his eyes. Now think about that for a second. If the man who is supposed to be the voice of reason in this town keeps rejecting a plan over and over again, and the only reason it's finally happening now is because he's being worn down, that is not a good sign. That is not someone getting convinced by better evidence. That is someone getting exhausted into agreement. And exhausted agreement is how people die in this show. Now let's talk about the actual plan itself, because I want you to really sit with what they're trying to do here. Jade wants to tear the bottle tree out by the roots, while a separate group goes down into the tunnels to dig up the bones of the children. 2 operations happening basically at the same time. One team ripping a tree out of the ground above, one team digging in a cavern below. And I don't know about you, but the second I heard that was the plan, my brain went straight to one question. What happens to the people underground the second that tree comes up? Because think about the geography here. If the tree is connected to whatever is holding that chamber together, structurally or otherwise, then pulling it out while people are still inside digging is not a backup plan, it's a trigger. It's like pulling the pin on something while your own people are standing directly underneath it. And I keep going back to that warning the boy in white gives Victor in this trailer. He shows up specifically to tell him not to let the others destroy the bottle tree because it's supposedly important. Now, the boy in white is not exactly known for being chatty. He doesn't just show up to make small talk. If he is taking the time to physically appear and tell Victor, in no uncertain terms, do not let them touch this tree, that tells me the tree is not just some prop in the background. That tree is load-bearing, either literally, in the sense that it's holding something up physically, or symbolically, in the sense that it's the thing keeping whatever is sealed away actually sealed. And this is where I think the plan falls apart before it even begins. Because nobody in that town seems to be putting these 2 pieces of information next to each other. Jade has his theory about the tree and the bones. The boy in white has his warning about the tree. And as far as we've seen, those 2 pieces of information are not being shared with each other. This is the same problem this show has had since Season 1, if we're being honest. Nobody talks to anybody. Information sits in someone's head instead of getting passed along to the one person who actually needs it. And I get that the show has addressed this a little bit. There was actually a comment from Harold Perino, who plays Boyd, about this exact criticism, where he talked about how this season the residents finally have more reason to trust each other after everything they've lost together. And look, I love that as a character beat. I do. But emotionally trusting someone and actually exchanging the specific tactical information that keeps you alive are 2 very different things. You can trust someone with your life and still forget to mention the angry warning a creepy child in white robes gave you about a tree. So let's talk about Victor for a second, because his arc in this trailer is doing a lot of heavy lifting emotionally, and I don't think people are talking about it enough. We see him at what looks like Miranda's grave, just talking to her. And right after that gentle, quiet moment, we cut to him absolutely losing it, with Boyd having to physically try and rein him in. That is a massive emotional swing in a very short amount of trailer time, and I don't think that's an accident. Here's my theory on what's happening with Victor. I think the visit to the grave is him trying to find some kind of peace before everything goes sideways. Maybe he's trying to say goodbye in his own head before he commits to a plan he already suspects is going to get people killed. And then I think the breakdown we see right after is what happens when somebody tries to talk him out of going through with something, or when he realizes the plan involves the tree that he was specifically told to protect. Picture this. Victor walks away from Miranda's grave with his mind made up about something, and then someone, maybe Boyd, maybe Jade, tells him the plan now involves ripping out the bottle tree. And Victor, who has heard the warning from the boy in white, completely unravels because he knows something the others don't fully understand yet. That would explain why Boyd is the one trying to hold him back. Not because Victor is just randomly losing it, but because Victor is the one person who has been explicitly told this is a mistake and he's watching everyone walk straight into it anyway. Now, here's a twist I want to throw in, because we've seen this exact dynamic before in this show. What if Victor's breakdown isn't actually about the tree at all? At least not directly. What if it's about who he thinks is going to volunteer to go down into that tunnel? We know how this show operates. The people who are the most protected, the most central to the story, somehow always manage to avoid the worst missions. So if Victor has figured out, even subconsciously, that someone he cares about is about to be sent down into that chamber while the tree comes up above them, that breakdown makes even more sense. He's not panicking about a plant, he's panicking about a death sentence with a tree attached to it. Let's talk about the bigger picture here, because I think the actual disaster in this episode is going to come down to timing, the same way it almost always does in the show. If the people digging in the tunnel are even slightly behind schedule when that tree comes up top, you have a serious problem. If communication breaks down between the two teams even for a few minutes, you have a serious problem. This show has built an entire mythology on bad timing and worse communication, and I don't see any indication in this trailer that this time is going to be different. If anything, splitting your already exhausted, already traumatized group into two separate operations at the same time feels like it's specifically designed to maximize how much can go wrong. So my prediction, and I want to be clear, this is a theory based on what we're seeing here, is that the tree comes down at almost exactly the wrong moment, either right as the digging team reaches the bones or right as they're trying to get back out. And the structure either partially collapses or seals them in. I don't think everyone in that tunnel survives this episode or the next one. I think this is set up to be one of the most devastating sequences the show has done, on the same level as watching someone get trapped and crushed in something like Game of Thrones, where you know exactly what's about to happen several seconds before it actually does, and you're just waiting for the moment it lands. Now, let's pivot to Tabitha, because her storyline in this trailer is just as important as Victor's, maybe more important depending on how this plays out. We already know from the previous episode that the man in yellow, wearing Sophia's likeness, got to Tabitha and planted serious doubt about this entire plan. He didn't just threaten her, he specifically told her that she was about to attempt something that had never been done before, and he mocked things connected to her son in the process. That is not a random scare tactic. That is targeted psychological pressure, aimed at the one person whose hesitation could change everything. So here's my question heading into this episode. Does Tabitha go along with the plan anyway, because she feels like she has to? Or does she actually become the person who stops it, or at least delays it long enough to save lives? Because right now, she is sitting on information nobody else fully has. She has had direct contact with the man in yellow in a way that felt less like an attack and more like a warning wrapped in cruelty. If she connects what he told her to what the boy in white told Victor, even by accident, even just by comparing notes with the wrong person at the wrong time, that could be the moment the whole plan either gets stopped or gets rushed forward out of fear. And knowing this show, rushing forward out of fear is exactly the kind of decision that gets people killed faster than just waiting one more day would have. Let's talk about Boyd for a second, because I think his arc this episode is the most tragic piece of this whole puzzle. We know his tremors and hallucinations have been getting worse. We know he keeps hearing the gunshot that killed his wife over and over in his head. This is a man who is not operating at full strength, mentally or physically, and he is the one being asked to greenlight the most dangerous plan this group has attempted all season. That is an enormous amount of pressure to put on someone who is already breaking down internally. And I think that's exactly the point. I think the show wants us to watch a man who is barely holding himself together make the call that determines whether other people live or die, and I think that call is going to haunt him for the rest of the season regardless of how it turns out. Here's where I want to bring in my own theory, something that hasn't been confirmed anywhere but that I think fits everything we've seen. What if the real reason Boyd finally agrees to this plan isn't because he's been convinced it will work, but because some part of him doesn't actually expect to survive whatever is coming, and he wants to make sure something gets resolved before that happens? Look at how the show has been building his physical and mental decline all season. If Boyd has quietly come to terms with the idea that his time leading this group is running out, agreeing to one last desperate plan, even one he knows is dangerous, fits a man who would rather go out trying to fix something than spend his last functioning days arguing about it. That's not confirmed by anything official. That's just a read on the pattern I'm seeing. And I want you to tell me in the comments if you think I'm onto something or if I'm reaching here. Now let's talk about what happens after the dust settles, because I don't think this episode ends with a clean win or a clean loss. I think it ends in the middle, which is honestly worse. I think some people make it out of that tunnel and some people don't. I think the bottle tree situation creates more questions than it answers, possibly revealing that the tree wasn't protecting what they thought it was protecting at all, or that pulling it up released something that was supposed to stay buried. And I think Tabitha walks away from this episode more isolated than ever, caught between what the man in yellow told her and what she watched actually happen, unsure who to trust, and unsure if speaking up earlier would have changed anything. One more thing I want to point out before we wrap this up. The episode title itself, The Calm Before, is clearly setting up the finale, which is titled, If a Tree Falls in the Forest. Think about that pairing for a second. A title about calm followed directly by a title that is literally about a tree falling. That is not subtle, and I don't think it's meant to be. I think the show is telling us directly that whatever happens with this tree in episode 9 is the hinge the entire finale swings on. If the tree comes down in this episode and something goes wrong, the finale is about dealing with the fallout. If the tree somehow doesn't come down, or comes down without the disaster I'm expecting, then the finale title becomes a different kind of warning, maybe about something else entirely connected to trees, roots, or whatever has been buried underneath that town this whole time. So here's what I want from you. Do you think Boyd's plan actually works, even partially? Or do you think this is the disaster I'm predicting? Do you think Victor's breakdown is about the tree, about someone he loves going underground, or something else entirely that we haven't even talked about yet? And do you think Tabitha ends up being the hero who slows this whole thing down? Or do you think she goes along with it out of fear and regrets it for the rest of the season? Let me know all of this in the comments, because I read every single one, and I want to see how many of you are seeing the same warning signs I am. Now I want to go back and talk about something I almost skipped over, and that's Fatima. We know from the previous episode that she started developing black veins across her body after using her connection to Smiley to save Kenny. That is a massive cost for a single act of mercy, and I don't think the show is done charging her for it. If this episode is about Boyd setting a dangerous plan into motion, I have to wonder if Fatima ends up being part of that plan in a way nobody is expecting. Whether she volunteers herself because she already feels like she's running out of time anyway, or whether the people around her try to keep her out of it because of what's happening to her body. Either way, a person who is already paying a physical price for using whatever power she has, connected to Smiley, is not someone you want anywhere near a high-stakes situation involving a tree that might be holding something back. If those veins are some kind of corruption spreading through her and she's standing anywhere near that tunnel when things go wrong, that feels like exactly the kind of detail this show would use to make an already bad situation catastrophic. Let's also talk about Henry for a second, because his visions of an alternate reality where Victor was happy and had a family are doing something very specific here. Shows don't usually hand a side character a vision like that unless it's building toward grief, toward a loss that's coming, or toward some kind of choice the visions are meant to foreshadow. If Henry is seeing a version of Victor's life that never actually happened, a life with happiness and family intact, that almost plays like the show preparing us for the version of Victor we're about to lose. Visions of a better life that could have been are rarely just background texture in something like this. They tend to show up right before the real version of that character gets taken away from us, whether through death or through some kind of permanent change. So if you put Henry's visions next to Victor's breakdown in the same trailer, I think you have two pieces of foreshadowing pointing at the same outcome from two completely different angles. Now here's something I want to add purely as my own theory, because I haven't seen anyone else connect these two details yet. We know Julie has been story walking throughout this season, connected somehow to the town's timeline. What if her story walking this episode intersects with whatever happens underground? Not in a way that saves anyone, but in a way that shows her, and by extension us, exactly how this cycle is played out before. Picture a moment where Julie walks into a memory or a vision tied to a previous cycle of the town, and what she sees is essentially a preview of the same tree, the same tunnel, and the same mistake being made by people who came before. If that's the case, this isn't even the first time someone has tried exactly this plan. It's just the first time we're watching it happen. That would explain why the warning from the boy in white feels so urgent. He's not guessing that this is a bad idea. He's seen it fail before. I also want to bring up the practical side of this plan one more time, because something about it has bothered me since I first heard the details. If the goal is to retrieve the bones of the children from that cavern, why does the tree removal need to happen at the same time as the digging instead of before it? Pull the tree out a day earlier, see what happens, assess the damage, and then send people down once you actually know what you're dealing with. Doing both at once isn't bravery, it's recklessness disguised as efficiency. And I think that disconnect is going to be the thing fans are talking about the most once this episode airs. Not whether the plan fails, but how obviously avoidable that failure was if anyone involved had taken even one extra day to think it through. So let's bring this all the way back to the title one more time before we close this out. The calm before. I keep coming back to this because I think the show is using it almost sarcastically. There is no calm in this trailer. There's a man talking to his dead wife's grave right before falling apart. There's a child in white robes issuing warnings that nobody seems to be taking seriously enough. There's a woman whose body is turning against her after an act of sacrifice. There's a vision of a happier life that almost certainly means loss is coming. And there's a plan being described in the show's own official language as dangerous. If this is the calm, I genuinely do not want to see what the storm looks like, even though we already know exactly what it's going to be called. So tell me where you land on all of this. Do you think the tree comes down and triggers the disaster I'm predicting in the tunnel? Or do you think the show pulls back at the last second and saves that moment specifically for the finale instead? Do you think Victor survives this episode? Or do you think his arc closes out here before the season even ends? Do you think Fatima's condition becomes a factor in how this plan plays out? And do you think Julie's story walking this episode reveals that this exact plan has already failed once before in a previous cycle? Drop every single theory you have down in the comments because I want to read all of it before the episode actually airs. And again, please subscribe so I can bring more updates to you. If this kind of breakdown is what you come here for, make sure you like this video, share it with anyone else who's been riding this season week to week, and subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. We only have 2 episodes left, and based on everything in this trailer, I don't think anyone in that town is getting the calm they're hoping for. Until next time, you know who it is. Peace and stay sexy.